Welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a real treat for you. His name is Ernest Stephens, and he is a senior executive recruiter for the city of Seattle, specifically in Seattle Public Utilities in beautiful Washington. Ernest, say what's up there, everybody.
Hey, good afternoon. Hello. Good morning, wherever it is you are. Nice to see you.
Good stuff, man. If you can't see Ernest right now, he's probably got one of the better fros that I've seen on the podcast. Don't get many. He's definitely got the fro and beard combo. I'm definitely jealous, but we'll dive into some other things here. So Ernest, senior executive recruiter. I mean, I love titles because some are super vague. I think a lot of us know what an executive is. Senior's kind of bland. A recruiter is kind of like, yeah, we get it. But tell us what a senior executive recruiter is and does for the Seattle Public Utilities.
Very good. So in my title, it is very interesting because when I came to the city of Seattle, I did not come specifically to work in Seattle Public Utilities. I actually started off working as an executive recruiter for the city of Seattle. The senior is more about my years of experience. And so that's more of a classification level. The executive part is I still do executive recruiting. I do it both for the city of Seattle on occasion for different department heads, but I also do it specifically for Seattle Public Utilities. So if we have executive positions, which I have a couple that are actively recruiting for right now, those come in to my shop, if you will. And my focus really is, finding folks that are good at this work, who will then align with the mission of Seattle Public Utilities and help us really do the work that we take so much pride in getting done.
Okay. That paints a picture for us. Difference between recruiting for public utilities and just recruiting for Seattle for any type of executive role. Is there like a certain place that Ernest's brain goes and thinks underground utilities, water, like the actual, the underground infrastructure versus just, a senior executive position?
Very good question. So I haven't been recruiting executives for more than about 5 years. So this, when you say recruiting versus recruiting executives, there is a difference. So most of my experience, I've been recruiting for probably about 10 years now. Yeah, just about 10 years. Especially recruiting in the way that I used to, I recruited for an agency, which means I had the opportunity to go out and, get a role. And my job was to, on behalf of another organization, go find the talent. So what that did for me is build up a certain amount of skills, certain type of skill set that I have to learn what the role is and then go find people to match it. I learned to build profiles that way. So, over time that allowed me then to build the skill set necessary to be able then to go out and find executive positions. And that's like I said, that's how I got into working at the city of Seattle to begin with. Time passed and I got an opportunity to join Seattle Public Utilities because it is a great public utility. I'll say that for sure. It is not what I thought it would be. It's one of the things that I find refreshing about working for Seattle Public Utilities is it is a combination of servicing community through obviously just what public works is all about, right? And it's one of those areas, public works in general is, if things are going well, you really don't think much about it, right? You turn, you pull out your driveway, turn down the streets are clear, you're happy, right? You put your trash out, you're done with whatever your waste is, you don't even think about really what happens to it after that. But let something go wrong, right? And all of a sudden your streets aren't clear, or your trash isn't picked up, or the water that you need to turn on does not come through the faucet, or it's not clean. Then all of a sudden, public works, it's a situation where things, are a bit more of a challenge, if you will. But it's not just about that. That's sort of the basic mission of public works, specifically for Seattle. For me, It's a lot more about how the work is being done. There's a concerted effort to be mindful about how we're doing things. If you know anything about Seattle Public Utilities, a lot of what we do and one of the things we take great pride in is the water that we have. And Seattle's the water source that we have is natural. When Seattle was in its early stages of the infrastructure being built, we had some folks that have some good insight to both power and actually get our water sources from beautiful, clean rivers that are, fed by the snowpack. We both get our hydroelectricity from there. Obviously, we get our drinking water from there, and it's kept very well. So there was a lot of forethought put into piping that water in for us. But how it was done in those days versus how it should be done is part of where the beauty in where we are now. It's how we handle the resources, right? So now we look at our job as being responsible stewards of these resources now. So it's about making sure we're keeping and caring for the land so we can continue to have clean, fresh drinking water, that we can have clean electricity for as long as we're able to. But also considering, even in doing that, what's the impact on the environment? So when you start to understand and see that side of it, there's an intrinsic buy-in. And that's really the driver for me, because what I do helps further that mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like one of those things. You start learning about it, then you get indoctrinated in it because you see the value in it. You see, like, oh, like this isn't just some position I'm hiring for that just moves one piece of paper from one side of the desk to the other. Like, they make sure, again, like, people have water, people have clean water, people can grow their families and businesses with our utilities, which I could see how you can kind of get, engulfed in it and go, oh, I'm a proponent of it for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of want to go in recruiting a little bit deeper, because my definition, or when I think of a recruiter, like you said before, somebody that goes out and is that matchmaker from that talent to that position that's vacant. You work within the city of Seattle, so you kind of know the vibe, like you said, the what mission the Seattle is on, and if somebody can follow that mission, I would say, what is your advice to those who are putting out help wanted ads or positions senior level, to know if that person can fit their culture, or even if they want their culture changed a little bit to find and help shape their certain culture, because it's hard to do in an interview process. So what are your best, I guess, tips and tricks for that?
Man, that really depends, right? So you mentioned something very crucial, and it's something I picked up on very early in my time in Seattle. So I'm not native to Seattle. I'm originally from Florida. I moved to Seattle once my wife got an opportunity that brought her out here. That was an Amazon. She works for a company called SPS, though, and they do business services for Amazon. So she was the one actually who was the transplant. She just was nice enough to bring me with her. I looked at it as a chance to sort of reset and see what the market had to hold. And so that's how I ended up here. But one of the things I learned getting here, Seattle is its own place, right? There is very much a culture to Seattle. And you have to understand that if you're going to do work here, particularly as an executive, right, then you have to understand that quick. Because if you come in with sensibilities, say from a utility where your focus is a lot more on revenue, I can tell you right now, that's not how we work at all. Because everything in our utilities are not privately owned, they're all publicly owned. We see ourselves, like I mentioned earlier, as stewards, right? And so even in how we treat the customer, we are considered stewards, right? And there's a different viewpoint, whereas in some cases, we may be a little more lenient and more accommodating, even in terms of billing. And where I've been to other municipalities, and if you didn't get, your light bill paid on time, or your electricity a certain way, it was going off, right? Because they are running a business and it's for profit. So that is so completely different. So it's very important that you understand the cultural difference, and it does make a difference. At least when I'm recruiting, I make sure folks know it's involved to come and be here. Most folks know Seattle and know it does have, these set of values, but I still want to make sure because people are still interested in a role. And just because you may think you're a fit for that role doesn't necessarily mean that role is a fit for you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure when people outside of Seattle think of the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, they think they got to like start wearing Birkenstocks and eating granola and driving a Subaru or something, start doing backpacking and all that.
Yep. You just hit a lot of people right now with that one.
But like you said, people are still interested in the role because again, people still want to find work, they want to provide for their families, and they still want to add value to society through a job that they have. And I'm sure it's probably a tough task for you to be able to go and find that. Talk us through kind of the day-to-day activities, from the time you get to work to the time you leave. Like, what's Ernest doing all day?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And that changes quite a bit. From the time I get to work, it really just depends where I am in a hiring process. I have multiple hiring processes going on. If I were to think about what my week looked like last week, I had my Monday started off at my office. I normally get in during the 6 o'clock hour. I'm setting things up. I had to then leave and go to one of our sites where our water operations control center was, because I had interviews that day. So I was there in person hosting interviews.
Wow.
For most of our interviews, I think for that particular process happened to be internal candidates. But nonetheless, I spent the first half of my day in the morning from about 9 till noon facilitating those interviews. And so once those were done, about maybe 11:30, I transitioned back to my office, which is the Seattle Municipal Tower in downtown, for another set of interviews, in-person interviews that were happening in the afternoon that day. So that's an unusual way for my Monday to happen, because most of the time my Mondays are my work from home days. But that's, you never know.
Yeah.
My days aren't typical in any one particular way, right? So the next day can be something completely different, supporting a completely different hiring process. My hiring process takes place in stages. So it could be where I'm drafting a job announcement. I'm working with the hiring manager to understand what the need is so that we can adequately advertise it, so that folks are drawn to it based on what's there, right? I always try to make sure that even within the advertisement, folks get a sense of what the mission is. If you think about it from a recruiting standpoint, it's almost like fishing. You have to change your bait depending on the species that you're trying to catch, right? So that's really what it is for me, is I want to make sure I'm putting something in there that speaks to the mission, that speaks to how that work helps to further that mission, and that gets people excited enough to want to read more about it. And then if they can see themselves in a role, apply.
Yeah.
So
that sounds exhausting.
It can be.
Well, no, the part about like, okay, you're putting out a job, it could be like $150,000 position, right? And you have to market it as if you're trying to sell them something that they might not want. You get what I'm saying? Like it's,
well,
like
not
you said,
necessarily, right? So it's not that it's the goal is not to sell them per se. I want them to read it and it resonate with them. Right? Because here's the thing about the public sector. The one thing that is true for most people who are public servants, number one, you're not in it for the money, not primarily, particularly when you start talking public works, because the skill set is such, usually in public works, is so niche that you could take it, applied in the private sector and make much more money. It's the element of public service that draws people. The thing that I want to make sure people see is the mission, in the same way that I tried to describe it to you earlier. and how that may be different in how we execute it from a public works standpoint here at Seattle Public Utilities. That's the difference for me. So I don't necessarily want to sell it. For somebody, it'll sell itself. Let's put it that way. I just need to make sure it's available for them to see.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. You spoke about internal versus external. I didn't know as a recruiter you're looking internally, which will make sense.
No,
sorry.
Funny enough, I've not run a single recruitment for Seattle Public Utilities where it was only an internal search. Not one. And I've done this now for, well, at least for Seattle Public Utilities for the last 2 years. So this is completely, what happens is, depending on who's qualified, right? Because I will tell you in the job announcement what we're looking for. There's the required requirements in order for you to be considered, and then there are desired, right? Desired means it's nice to have, right? We would love to have these, but in order for you to be considered, I'll give you an example, a civil engineer. Well, at minimum, you need to have a degree as a civil engineer or certain number of years experience working under another civil engineer who can then sign off for you, right? So one way or the other, you have to have that we can validate. And then if you're coming to work for us at Seattle Public Utilities, you have to have a license. So we have to have that within the state of Washington. If you already have one in another state, usually through reciprocation, you can get it. So we can accept that, but you'll have to have it to start.
Okay, that makes sense. You might not, I guess, you might not deal with this from the day to day, but I'm sure you can shed some light on it. So my focus, or I feel like our best and brightest are focusing on the aging infrastructure of our, the aging infrastructure in our industry. Absolutely. I like to focus on the aging workforce in our industry.
Absolutely.
Meaning and again, like, these are operators, supervisors, they're aging out. They're looking at retirement in the next 6 months, 2 years. They're taking all that institutionalized knowledge. What have you seen, whether it's Seattle or some surrounding cities or just your personal network, that has worked to get that younger, newer talent, those who might not, like you said, have that public utility skill set mindset or that thought process, with them? What have you seen that's been able to get them in, train them, and then keep them around for the time being?
Now, see, that's the tough part, right? Because what you're talking about is, and it is something I'm keenly aware of, because it's not just true within public works, it's true within the workforce period, right? We have folks, current generations don't value a career the same way that previous generations do. We're probably, if you're a Gen Xer, I'm a Gen Xer. If you're Gen Xer, you're probably right on that edge. Yeah, you're close enough.
Yep.
You're probably right on that edge where you valued that. Now, I will say the public sector is probably leading tenure all the way across. It's probably still the one area of the workforce in general that still keeps tenure better than most. But now, if you get someone to stay 3 to 4 years someplace, that's probably the lifespan or something, right? So the challenge is, what do you do, like you said, with the institutional knowledge, right? How do we attract new talent? It's a little bit more challenging for us to do that unless we're getting out into schools earlier, right? Before folks graduate. Why? Because they need specialized skill sets to come and do the work we need to do. That helps to design the work. Right. So from an engineering standpoint, you got to get those kids in school so that they now see it as a viable career path that looks rewarding to them, so that they will then pursue engineering degrees. Right. So that helps with the design piece of it. Now, on the other side of it, that's white collar work, if you will. There's still the blue collar work. The good part about that is we have apprenticeship programs that essentially we're able to, and I've been at job fairs where I'm able to talk to folks who were, I've been to military job fairs, and I talk to folks about making a transition. I've done the same for student job fairs. Women in Trades is a show that we do, not a show, but a program that we do or we attend here in Seattle. It's normally held at Seattle Center. we talk to folks about the opportunity to join our apprenticeship program. So then we give folks, you're talking about paid training essentially to come and learn to do the work. A lot of the blue collar work that, the work that you see folks on the side of the road doing that you're trying to drive by, that keep people safely on the roads and keep the roadways clear and free of water, that kind of work. Well, those are viable job opportunities that people just don't talk about. A lot of times you don't get those at the career fairs you go, and it's not something that people talk about in school. It's usually doctor, lawyer, scientist, influencer nowadays, right? But there are still those people, thankfully, that are drawn to public service. But you can't be drawn to something if you're never exposed to it. So for us, it's about finding those opportunities to get out in front of folks and show them. So we'll have displays, we'll have videos running, showing folks, and then we talk about, what the benefit of it is in terms of joining a public utility and working for the city. We talk about the benefits, but we also show them how you help to make the city go.
Yeah. No, that helping the city go, I feel like even coming out of high school, like I was blessed to play football, but I remember I was kind of in inner city high school, and that was like prime hunting grounds for Army or like certain armed forces recruiters.
Yep.
And I could tell they never sold us on or tried to sell us or convince us by using money. They said, hey, you can be all you can be.
Yep.
That was a slogan back then. Be all that you can be. Right. That means you're human. You got 10-inch biceps. By the time you leave the Army, you're going to have 15-inch biceps. And you're going to have a trade, or you're going to have a GI Bill. They have, there's certain ways that they can recruit. And I feel like in our industry, again, we don't use money to get people into the public service, but I do think there is ways that you can entice a youngster. Like, again, I always say, and selfishly, I think the public works industry should have their own uniform. Meaning a lot of young kids, they aspire to be a police officer, an astronaut, a doctor, a firefighter. Why? Because all I just named, those have uniforms.
Recognizable.
I know that guy. He's an astronaut. He's a police officer. He's a firefighter, and you want to attain to that. I feel like if Public Works had some type of uniform or something where you drive past them, it's 5 guys. They're on the side of the road. They're fixing a whatever. If they have a uniform, a youngster will go, huh? Those are the people that help move my community forward, and I can too be that person one day. So I don't know. That's my soapbox on the uniform in our industry. I think we should get there.
But you raise a valid point. The thing is, the uniforms would change so much depending on the role, right? So the same way, one of the things you think about that you're always sort of shown as an occupation, there's a police officer, there's a scientist, there's a doctor, there's a lawyer. You do see construction worker, but guess what? The construction worker uniform is usually a hard hat, boots,
and a yellow vest. Yeah.
Guess what? You can take that same uniform and put it instead of the hard hat being just a generic yellow, it could actually be one that says Seattle Public Utilities. And you're taking those same skills and just applying them in a different context, right? There's a lot of different ways. But also, if you're a civil engineer, your uniform may be khakis, a button-down shirt or a polo and a vest when you're working in the office. But then it changes when you go outside, right? But it's definitely the exposure. But you're right, the uniform would make a difference because it is, like you said, you got the white coat for a doctor, you got definitely the uniform and the hat for the police officer. Construction worker has that uniform, but pretty much they throw everything else into construction. They don't understand the public work side of it.
Exactly. I want to go back into ageism. Again, I talk to a lot of people in this industry, who are retiring, and a lot of them feel like once you get a certain age, you're kind of stuck. Like there's no use to, going out, putting fillers, dusting off your resume. What do you say to those who are, maybe they have 3 to 5 years on their in their career left, they're about to retire soon. What do you say to those? Like, it's okay to put in an application to get a senior level position, even if a city doesn't think you'll stick around for that long.
That's a very good point. It is something that I find myself battling with people all the time who reach out to me directly to ask questions, right? There are folks late stage who find themselves in the job market for various reasons. Either they're changing utilities, who knows, maybe there are layoffs that happen, or just a transition that happens. They're no longer a fit where they are. And they come with a perceived age bias of their own. They already have in their mind that they're being discriminated against. And I won't necessarily say it's not true, but the thing is, the worst thing you can do is come in with that bias in your own thought process, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
the one thing is, and I know you've experienced it, there's an old, and I'm just going to throw a generic number, 55, and then there's a young 55.
That's true.
Right? And like I said, the number is not important, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about just a generic person.
Mm.
There are people that are, I've talked to people in their 80s that are just as spry and energetic, and have the right attitude. And the thing that they bring that's an advantage over a lot of other folks is experience. And for folks who are listening and paying attention to this, the one thing you cannot teach is experience.
That's true. Can't hack it. Yeah.
In public works where we need specialized work, if you have that experience, it is valued. So the worst thing you can do is sabotage yourself by thinking you have, or you're going to experience some sort of age bias, because you probably are now biasing yourself against it.
Yep.
And because you are, you move as though you're going
Yep.
to be discriminated. So you decide, no, I'm not going to do it. You're more selective. I'd much rather you be selective and choose things that you're looking to pursue and you feel you can add value to than to self-select out. Because if there have been so many situations where I've had people and I tell them, I value your experience. You've done and probably forgotten more than many of the people that we're considering now. And the youth isn't as important in this particular role unless you're, you're outside on the road doing work. There's a little more concern there. Naturally, is can you keep up? But listen, we have folks out there now that can run circles around young people.
I've seen it.
It's a case-by-case basis. And the last thing you want to do is eliminate yourself because of your perceived age bias.
That's such a good point. I feel like we're in our, like I do that when I'm pitching a city or a company on a certain thing. I'm like, and again, like I'm 37 now, but when I first got in the industry, I was in my 29, 30, and like you feel like you're too young. Like they're not gonna cut me a check this big. I'm way too young for this. Or even color. Like you walk into a room and you don't see anybody your same color. You're like, ooh, well, this, and we get in our own head, and that never helps ever. Like, when does that ever help? So
nothing.
That's a good point. So let's dive a little bit deeper into Ernest's backstory. So you said you're not from the Seattle area. You're from Florida. I don't hear an accent, so it sounds like you figured that out. Talk us through kind of your career path from high school all the way up until today, because somebody might want to model their career after yours.
I don't know if you want to model your career after mine. So, quite honestly, from high school, I had no idea I would be where I am now. Let's put it that way. My intention really was to study psychology and become a psychologist. I think my studies served me well. I did go to college. I did not complete a degree in psychology. I've done some master's level coursework in business, and it served me well. So I have a very interesting set of experience. I did not take the traditional route and go right to school after high school. I started doing the workforce at 19. I started off in retail. What that did give me, though, is about 9 years of experience learning business. And that gave me business acumen. Where I originally got my experience in human resources was retail, because one of my primary focuses was the human resources aspect involved in a retail store. So the interviewing and hiring, that was foreshadowing, because I had no clue that's something that I would want to do later in my life. I went on to operations management. I did that for a couple of call centers, and eventually became an operations manager. Actually started off, running teams as a supervisor, and then moved into operations management. And then again, that's the business acumen, understanding how operations works, really sort of helped me from that standpoint. And from there, I transitioned into recruiting. Really is what was the next step. That was an accident that had to do with me meeting my future wife, and her letting me know this may be a viable path. She encouraged me and helped me to find a job in recruiting, and it is something I took to, and eventually led a team in recruiting within an organization, moved into healthcare recruiting. Once that organization, we hit some rough times, and of course I needed to transition. So I went into healthcare recruiting. Again, same sort of thing, built up different skills, and then applied some of the previous skills I had. It led me up to the point that I mentioned earlier, where wife had an opportunity here in Seattle. I chose to trail along with her because she was nice enough to let me. And I said, you know what, let me see what I could do in this market. I was very selective. My employer at the time was great to me, and they said, you know what, you can work remotely. But I said, let me just see what other options are there in a new job market. So I said, here is where I want to take my career. I want to work for an organization that I can believe in, and I want to focus and represent that organization. So I was very intentional. I filled out one application, and it was for the city of Seattle. That's how I ended up in public service. Little did I know the skills that I had acquired over the course of that journey was a composite fit to put me in the place and time where I was to join the city of Seattle at the beginning of a mayoral administration in the middle of a pandemic. And my goal at that time was to work and help that, that essential, help support that administration fill out his cabinet. So I essentially learned the city way of recruiting by working at the highest level. And so it was only because I had a composite of skills that brought me to this point. And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was saying that's why I asked that questions, because no matter the background, we all pick up skill sets on the way. I'm sure your time with retail, that gave you so many different, touches of different types of people and how to handle them. That's retail, baby. I get it.
Yes, sir.
Call center, like, come on now, like that's
yes, sir.
Like, I get it, man. Like you talk to different types of people all day, every day. You're managing teams, you're managing personalities and emotions, and all that, helps you gather a toolbox or a tool belt of what you need every day today. But I'll ask the question, let's say a youngster is interviewing you and they ask you, what's the main skill set they should pick up to be successful at what you currently do? What would that one skill set be?
Oh, man, you need to have a love for people and be able to interact with them. And I know that's not necessarily a skill set, but when you have that skill set, when you have that quality, you develop the skill set, provided you have the right personality. I started off, and I'll tell you, I'm still an introvert, but I had to develop the ability to grow. When I started off in retail, I was a part-time seasonal stock associate. I worked in the back, which was great for me, but I kept getting challenges by people that I worked with. I had a mentor in one of my managers who saw something different in me, saw how I led, gave me an opportunity to lead, got my team to a point where I was able to perform. And he eventually kept presenting challenges for me. And that challenge took me out of the back into the front while managing the back. But it was during non-store hours. And then eventually he showed me, well, you're doing all the stuff that a manager would do, you might as well take an opportunity, right? So what I discovered as an introvert is that I did enjoy interviewing. I did enjoy wanting to talk to people, but there was something more than that. It was the fit. It was the identifying, this person may have this particular gift or ability, and you can identify what that is and then help them find their place. Now, of course, as you get moving from retail, that's one thing. Then you learn how to take that same sort of quality and identify it with people who may have a more specialized skill set, and how can they apply it in this context. It's easy for a civil engineer because it's plug and play. But if there are transferable skills for, maybe a position that does support, maybe the general manager's office, for instance, that's the side of public works that folks don't think a lot about. There's a lot of policy work that goes into play when you're dealing with a public utility. And those policies impact the way the work is done. Well, you need to find people who are good at policy work. But how many people who study policy think about doing it for a public utility, right?
That's true.
So it's about being able to find that skill set and then help them see it in a different context. And of course, they need to have the motivation to do it. That's the main thing. So if you have a love for people, remember the human part of human resources, because you want to make sure what you're doing is a fit for both sides. You want that person to come and want to do the work, right? Because it's mission work at the end of the day. It's the way they should see it, because they need to be dedicated to it. Because if we find ourselves in an emergency, we may need to kick things into overdrive, and it may not necessarily be an 8-hour work day and go home.
Sure. How do you, because I consider myself a hopeless romantic. You talk to my wife, she knows I just fall in love with people. Like I'll meet somebody at the gas station. Oh, that's my dude right there. Like, how do you not get attached to some of the, and like you said, falling in love with people? How do you, I would say, separate, the human aspect and say, okay, is this person a viable fit for our city or our department or that department or this department, versus just hearing, talking to the person and getting to like them and saying, oh, this person is going to take us to the mountaintop.
That's a good question. So the good part about how that works for me and where I sit in that process is I'm not the hiring manager. Right? I am the recruiter. My job is to come in, have the interpersonal relationship, help facilitate the connection between the two. Right? My goal really, though, as an individual, and this is why I go back to it being important that you like the people, is I want to help each person I'm working with put their best foot forward. The reason being is, if I get the hiring manager to see each person at their best, then I've done my job. If I help each person I'm working with put their best foot forward, now the hiring manager should have a better sense of what's there. I'm trying to interrupt whatever nervousness they may have, right? Because naturally, if you're processing what's going on, I don't know this face, I really want this job. What are they thinking? If you're so busy in your head, you're not letting what's in you come out, right? In terms of your experience, you're not composed enough to put your best foot forward. So I do spend time trying to prepare folks to be able to do that. That's a case-by-case basis, right? That happens a lot more at the executive level when the stakes are higher. That I've now built a personal relationship that takes time over months to build, because government processes don't move quickly, no matter what, right? So that part of it is important. So you got to keep the human piece involved there.
Gotcha. And I'm sure we could talk about this next topic for 2 hours, but just give me one or two tips for those in an interviewing process. They just got reached out to by a recruiter, they're like, oh yeah, I do want to move jobs. I would like to make more. I do want to, make a step in my career. What should their mindset be? What should their, just talk me through, maybe how to help somebody who's looking for a new position. They got reached out to by a recruiter. What they should do next?
They got reached out to. Number one, they need to know whether or not the work that's involved is work that they can do or are interested in doing long term, particularly if it is not local. And one of the things that I never took for granted or took lightly is the fact that if this person takes the job and they have to relocate, this is literally changing their life. At minimum, even if they don't have to move, it is impacting their life and the way they go about it day to day. So fit is important. So for me as a recruiter, it's important that you feel good, that you get all the information you need to make a decision. right? And one of the things I say about interviews is an interview is a two-way street. At some point, you should have the opportunity to ask questions. If you don't, it's an interrogation, right? So at the end of the day, it's a two-way street, because while they may be offering you a job, you need to take the job. So the first thing you want to know is the work, get as clear a picture of the actual work itself as you possibly can. Then do your background about the culture of that organization, right? What's its reputation? That may be that. I mean, to nowadays, it's easier than ever before. If you were, working in the classifieds trying to apply for jobs back in the 80s in a newspaper, you had no idea. It was just word of mouth to the best of your ability, right? Yeah. You have the internet now. Yeah. And you're carrying around a cell phone that is more powerful than the rockets than the computers that guided the rockets to the moon, right?
Yeah.
You can find out anything in a matter of seconds almost, in terms of a better sense of what the reputation is. A lot of different resources. People will use Glassdoor. People got to use that with and you got to take that with a grain of salt, because
it's
always, you think about it, it's almost like a Yelp review, right?
Yeah. They never leave a review when they're happy. Yeah.
Right. It's if people ask me, one of the best places in the entire city of Seattle to work is Seattle Public Utilities. That's my viewpoint, right? Mm-hmm. But each person's individual experience is different. If you were someone who did not work well, was not trustworthy, and you got fired, what kind of review are you going to leave on Glassdoor? Right?
They never take accountability. So
they're never going to give you that side of it. So, but the reality is, talk to people. And I, as a recruiter, people ask me all the time, and I'm never afraid to talk to them about it and let them know. But you should know as much as you can about the work you're going to be doing and the environment that you're going to be working in terms of the culture. It's got to fit your personal values. Is it a place that you can work? Otherwise, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, I can attest to that. All right, it's story time. I need a story from Ernest. When something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Man, I can take a ton of those. I wish I could single out one particular thing. That's a tough one. Let me think on that and come back to you.
Okay. Take your time. It's hard. So one thing you touched on earlier, Nat, and I've having been on part of associations and talking to people who I would say the recruiters, but they always have like, hey, we got this job description. Can you help us get the word out? And I think, okay, this one pager, maybe sometimes 2-pager job description. I see a lot of people online, LinkedIn mostly, gripe about the job description, whether they're not transparent with pay, where they say, oh, it's a range from 80,000 to 190,000. If of course you see the 190, you're like, but then you get there and they say, well, we'll pay you 86, take it or leave it. So what do you advise those, whether cities, companies, to be able to, I guess, dial in that description and also dial in that salary range to what somebody, like you said, when they read it, they get excited about it, and like they can, I hate to say it, but intelligently like tell their mother-in-law about it, towards like, yes, this is what I'm going to do. Here's how much they're potentially paying me. I'm interviewing for this. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Well, so that's a tricky one, right? I've looked
Come
at
on,
that
man.
for many years. No, but let's break it down. Okay. I've looked at that for many years on the other side of it, right? Man, there's this potential. It could be from this to this. And for years, you never saw salary, right? State of Washington requires us to have salary. That's probably going to spread a lot more. Now, because state law requires us to put the entire salary range, for transparency purposes, we put the entire salary range. Now, on the other side of that, would you pay someone with 2 years of experience the same amount that you would pay somebody with 20 years of experience?
What if they're just as good, man?
You mean to tell me somebody with 2 years of experience is just as good as somebody with 20?
You got me.
Okay, so that's the thing. And so if you think about it, logically, there's no way at 2 years you can expect to be at the top of the salary range. You can't command the same amount. You don't bring the same level of experience, right? So That's really what it is. It's trying to pay commensurate with experience.
Gotcha.
And also particularly in public service and in a government entity, you're talking about a salary range. Well, guess what? Those usually have regulations and steps that you go through, right? So you come in a particular first step. They do that to keep pay consistent. Now, you may come in at a different step given a number of years of experience, which is kind of the same sort of correlation, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what it comes down to is it's the experience level and the classification of the position. Now, a position may be classified at one level, and you have to be qualified to meet that level. And then you start in at that step and then move up. That's called a step progression position. And then there are others where we have a little more discretion on the salary, but we'll still use the same thought process, not necessarily a step. We're looking at years of experience compared to what we have internally when it comes to internal equity. We're not going to bring you in, and the reason is we want to avoid pay compression. We don't want to be in a situation where we brought somebody in at this number and completely just did a disservice to the person that's been working with us for a number of years. It's not just simple as I see the numbers, I want the biggest one. That is a very myopic way to look at it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Probably the worst thing a company could do is pay somebody brand new, whether they have the experience or not, pay the new person more than the person who's been there, I would say, loyal to them for the last X amount of decades or years, because it does create a culture where you're like, oh, they get the high number on the job description. I'm at the middle number. Like, what do they do so good? So now you're right. That clarifies it. Thank you for doing that. All right. I want to know how Ernest continues to level up. You could just continue to take interviews and just meet people and greet people and do all that. But I can tell, you're more introspective. You want to get better at your job and keep progressing through your career. So how does Ernest keep putting new information into your brain to be able to operate moving forward?
I try to cut time out for myself. At least 30 minutes over the course of a week to try to work on a new skill to add something to the toolbox. Whether it be learning different technology, AI has been very interesting in trying to integrate that as a tool into my toolkit. Right now, we really don't have anything super active, but it never hurts for me to know. Some of the tools I use, for instance, LinkedIn has AI features. So, I went and got certification on that so that I can be sharp in that, so that I can be better and more efficient with my time when I am looking. So that's one way, but it's also trying to keep abreast of the different technologies that are there and the way it's being applied in HR so that we can figure out how to make our processes more efficient, right? So we can get more done and get, and really it's about efficiency, at least for me, and then being able, like you said, to sort of level up. So there's that. And then on a personal level, still trying to find little areas and avenues to, whether it be self-help book here or there, or just something that sort of keeps my mind open and going. And then trying to keep a growth mindset, man. That's really it. If you believe you're only defined as X, unfortunately, you'll be limited to being just X. But understanding that you have the opportunity to gain new skill sets and apply in different contexts, that's the biggest thing for me. It's the best way to sort of keep leveling up.
Yeah. What keeps a recruiter up at night? Like it's 2 a.m., the wife's snoring away. You're thinking about your job. What are those things that keep you up at night as a recruiter?
Man, the first scenario that came up in my mind is it is, in an executive position. This is a leadership role. And we're down to a couple candidates. Are they going to start? Right? They're coming from a different city. Are they going to show up?
Oh, wow.
We've offered them the job. Wow. Are they going to take it?
Are they going to show up? Wow.
Are they going to show up? Right. So, so there's only so much you can do up to a certain point. I will say this: I've never had no one not show up at the executive.
Okay.
I can say that, right? That usually happens for lower level positions, but it is something that you think about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is something that you concern yourself with, because you don't ever settle. I mean, you get to milestones, right? They get to the interview, you know what they have. You recommend them. It is really up to them now to execute in the interview. Will they interview well? That's another one, right? So those are the things that can keep you up at night. From there, do we have qualified candidates for this role that you need to get filled?
Yeah.
So those are the things that probably keep me up, or at least I start to think about when I wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Gotcha. What would you say is the win for Ernest? Like, what's that pattern? Is it a proper placement where the candidate interviews, they show up, they start working 90 days, they're like crushing it already? Or is a win like just finding somebody? Like, what would you say is that the confetti falling from the ceiling moment for Ernest?
The big one for me is the candidate. It's the fit. It's the fit. It's when the person who applied for the job that you've gotten a sense that they really want it. The hiring manager likes the candidate, and you can see like they want to move forward.
Yeah.
Job offer is made from one side. Job offer is accepted. Both sides are excited. That's the win. Okay. It's not just we got them to say yes, right? That's a very weird way to look at it. If I were at an agency, that's one thing. But I am looking to make sure not just that I got somebody to take a job. That's not my goal. I'm looking for a fit, because if my focus is on the success of the organization, I need the hiring manager to win. That means if that hiring manager won, they brought somebody to their team that's going to add value and wants to do that work. They want to be there. And they found somebody that they want to be there. Yeah. That's the win for me.
Okay. Cool. Let's say, let's talk misconceptions. You're at a dinner party. Somebody asks you, you always get the question. So, Ernest, what do you do? And you tell them you're a recruiter, senior level executive recruiter for the Seattle Public Utilities. They probably go, they're thinking, what do you think they're thinking about what you do?
Oh man, it really depends on what party. I don't go to a ton of parties, but I've had that kind of conversation with other recruiters, local to my market. So, you recruit for so-and-so. And it's been, they're also recruiters, but they may recruit for Amazon or Google. So the work is different. And they know it's for the public sector, and so they don't necessarily understand the drive or the pull to it. Because sometimes those folks are just money oriented, right? They're after that lucrative opportunity, and I could probably take that skill set, apply to their context, and probably make more money. But money isn't the primary motivator for me, right? It's the impact that I'm able to have. So that's the thing, right? I've talked to folks in those in some of those industries, for instance, and I've had them say to me they're in golden handcuffs, right? Where they're paid well, but I also know what they got to go through and what kind of pressure they have to be under, because they got numbers to meet to earn that pay. And but I very much the same way. I have numbers to meet, but I don't have a number. They're not coming after me saying you need to have this number. I need to win by finding the right person. So it's a little different. I have a mission. And for me, I'd much rather work that way than to just chase money. And listen, there's no judgment. Each person is motivated differently. I just know for me, I started off in that kind of environment. And while I was able to be successful, I wasn't happy. It wasn't what drove me.
Yeah.
And so it even changed how I operated then, because there were certain things I would not do to get somebody to say yes because it made me money. The fit even then still mattered. So was I getting as many yeses as everybody? No. But what happened was when someone said yes, you knew they were going to show up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. What I always like to ask the question of those who work for a city. Most people who know somebody who works for the city feel like they have a bat line, meaning they could call the person that works for the city and ask them certain questions of like, hey man, you missed my trash today, or what's going on A Street, and this or that. So what would you say is some of the most common notorious text messages, emails, phone calls you get as a recruiter for a city like Seattle? What are some of the things people reach out to you and say, hey man, can you help me with this, or can you do that for me?
The one that I get all the time, and it happens on LinkedIn all the time. It's never a phone call. Thankfully, it's always well, you know what? No, it's never a phone call externally. Internally, it can be. When I say externally, meaning somebody who doesn't work for the city. Wanting to. They will always reach out either via email or LinkedIn, and they want to know how to get a job.
Okay.
I have no issue with that. But if I work for Seattle Public Utilities and you ask me about a different part of the city, I may not have that answer because I don't work in part of the city, right? So the best that I typically do in those situations is try to help folks understand what the processes are. And it's I like I said, I have no problem with it because there is this, when you don't understand how maybe a bureaucracy works, you start to make up stories that, there's different things that happen. But what you have to understand is City Seattle runs open competitive processes, which means we'll post a job. It's going to be posted from this time to this time. We want everybody to apply. From there, people's applications are evaluated based on minimum qualifications. And then from there, we then have, at least for ours at Seattle Public Utilities, we find subject matter experts. So people who do the work or who are adjacent to the work in some way will then review, not just one person, but usually at least 2 or 3 will look at resumes independently, and they will then come together, and then I will facilitate a discussion, and they will make a recommendation from there. And the goal is to take as much bias out of the process as possible so that the qualified people, based on the application materials, are the ones that are forwarded. So yes, you're competing, but what ends up happening is people want to know how to, when they call or they email, they're trying to get ahead of the pile. Well, I don't care what you do. At the end of the day, you're going into the pile, and the pile, whether you're at the top or the bottom, is going to be evaluated all the way through. So most of the time when people are calling, it's because they're trying to compete and use that opportunity to keep themselves ahead, which you've been taught to do. And that's in general, and it may work in the general setting, maybe in the private sector, it could, but in the public sector where the processes are so regimented, there's no benefit to you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Answer this for me. You say there's 2 candidates, all else being equal. One has been interviewed on the Public Works podcast, and the other one hasn't. Which one's going to have a better chance to get in that position?
Well, if he lets me know he's interviewed in the Public Works podcast, let me actually go try to listen to the episode and glean some notes.
Now, you would listen to it for a candidate?
No. Well, you know what? It depends on the role.
Yeah.
I've done that before. I've done that kind of thing. Because particularly for executive level positions, like I said, some of the work I've done for the mayor's office in the past. So in that situation, I'm trying to get as much due diligence done as possible. So if there's information publicly consumable, I'm trying to consume
Instagram, LinkedIn posts, Twitter posts.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
I need to get a sense. And the reason being is if there's information available that helps me know a person better, I want to know as much about them as possible. That's both good or bad. which is why you need to be very careful about your presence publicly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen situations where people have at the higher levels, at executive levels, and that's both for Seattle Public Utilities or the city at large.
Yeah.
May have had something out there in the public that they probably wish they hadn't, and it has been an unfortunate reality that came to light and definitely had an impact on the hiring decision.
Yeah, I used to mentor kids in the football recruiting process, and I would tell them, I say, clean up your social media. I say you can be a great athlete, you can be wanted by the school, but there's always another athlete just as good as you, and he's not doing keg stands or he's not doing stupid stuff on his social media. Or like worst case scenario, just make it private. Well, please don't put out information that's again a negative, or perceived negative. I hate to say it, like you say anything about politics, religion, or anything. Half of the country thinks you're negative or positive,
one way or the other,
which is unfortunate, but that's the reality we live in. You got to play the game.
Absolutely. You got to be mindful of what's out there. If you put it out for public consumption, assume the public is going to consume it.
Right? Forever. Forever. All right. Let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Seattle. What ask of your community are you going to put on this billboard?
Listen to the warnings, particularly when it comes to preparing for inclement weather. In the winter, particularly in the Seattle area, all sorts of things can happen. If you get snowfall, if you get high winds, you can lose power. There are all sorts of and it's seasonal, it changes from fire season on, and when there's smoke. Doing the things that you need to do to make sure your house allows you to have clean air during that time. Preparing for power outages, doing the things to make sure that your home is ready and prepared to deal should you find yourself in inclement weather. That's the one thing that I think folks take for granted. Not to mention we live in a seismic area, right? So it's not a matter of if there's going to be the ground shaking or not, it's when, and are you ready for it, right? And what does that mean? So are you taking the precautions that we say to take, given the circumstances? So there are all sorts of scenarios. I remember a couple of years back when our water supply was low because we did not have a very healthy snowpack that year. As a matter of fact, I know what happened is we did not have the same snowfall that we normally had, but we also had a unusually warm spring. So the snow melted faster, which means we ran through our water faster. So in about September, October, we were at dangerously low, not dangerously low. We were cautious in terms of our water levels, right? So, but thankfully, most of the folks here listen when we, sort of put that information out, and we ask for voluntary water reductions. And thankfully, folks ensued, right? They were conscious enough to do that. But that's one thing that's real time and it's pretty simple. But we can't tell you to do something that we told you to do to prepare. Once you need it, it's too late. So it's just, if I could give any sort of instructions, is to make sure that you are prepared and do what's necessary to make sure your family is safe.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey. And then also, I want you to give your public utility recruiter counterparts across the nation a word of inspiration and motivation.
Oh, man. Mentors is tough. I don't have a ton of them. I will think back to a couple from earlier in my years. I had a mentor by the name of Michael Tracy, who was a manager for me in retail. And he was the one who really changed the way I saw working with people because of how he saw and was strategic with me. He got me to see that people have different gifts and talents, and then if you can find a way to engage them and employ them, that folks are happier. Because again, he did that with me. I had no idea, but because I had the chance to work with him, I see work differently. So there's Michael. Another person who served as a mentor later in my career, a gentleman by the name of Dean Caruso. I worked with him when I lived in Florida. Just as someone who was always a listening ear and helped me acclimate. He believed in me when other folks maybe did not necessarily see for the line of work I was getting into. He saw, I guess, some of himself in me and invested time in me, and I appreciate that. So I think about that. But if I really were to take the word mentor seriously, I should give another name. Pam Inch works for the city of Seattle. Has worked with the city of Seattle a number of years, and was a person I came in to work with and support when I worked for Seattle's Human Resources Department. And is still, to me, someone I consider a mentor to this day. The work that she's done, and she's shown me the ropes. I owe everything in my city career to her, because without her, I would not be here. She saw something in me in my application and took a chance on me, and it's still somebody, even to this day, I think, and I'm grateful for. If I were to really, really go into mentorship, I think about my uncle. And I don't think it was ever his intention to necessarily be a mentor, but he was a mentor to many. He was a physical education teacher. He's a former Marine. He is someone who also served in this church for a number of years. And he had an impact as a coach, as a sports coach. And on many levels, he was a mentor. So he was my uncle, but by watching him be a mentor to many other people and the way he served for me, he was probably the most prominent mentor in my life. So he is Coach Nathaniel Stephens. He's no longer with us, but he was probably, I have to credit him for being a greater father figure than even my father was at that point, simply because of the power of his example. I mean, he was a linchpin in my family. So I am grateful for him.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And then what he said to all the recruiters out there, they're in the trenches, they're fighting the same battles you're fighting. What he said, keep motivated, keep them inspired.
Yeah, to keep them inspired. Well, you have to think about the piece that you play in the puzzle. And my hope, first of all, is that you feel valued where you are. And that a lot has to do, of course, with the leadership that you work with and the team that you're a part of. But if you don't feel a sense of mission, think about, while what your work is indirect, it does have a direct impact on the ability of the organization you work with to be impactful in the city that it serves, right? So you have to be careful to search to find the best and really understand the value that you bring. One of the things that I hear a lot, and you can see in a lot of different spaces, is recruiting is easy. Anybody can do it. And then you see, you talk to people who try to give you tips on how to recruit or what have you, and you realize there are very fundamental pieces of recruiting that you don't understand. There are fundamental pieces of talent acquisition that if you don't get right, you lose candidates. You got to know how to respond to them, when to make touch with them, what touches to make. When is the right tone? When is a phone call appropriate? When is a text message appropriate? What are you saying to them? How do you keep them engaged? Particularly in the public sector, because public sector processes, it's not just I interview with you this week and you got a job next week. It's not how it works. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a process that has to take place. So it's being able to find good talent, engage them, keep them engaged, to bring them all the way through until they, one, decide they want to be with you, and then hold them until they actually start.
It sounds like dating, man, like modern day dating.
Is it really what it is? It's dating. It's like marriage. It's trying to get someone. It's trying to be a matchmaker to the point where you're getting them to propose, right? So the employer proposes, the employee accepts, and
Yeah,
You
you
know,
don't
they
want to
need it.
call too much and seem desperate. You don't want to text too much and seem like
Right.
aloof or off-putting. Whew, it's exhausting.
It's a lot of managing expectations
That's true. Yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for that. All right. Let's see where we at here. Let's say I'm coming to town and I
Uh-huh.
text you ahead of time. I say,
Uh-huh.
Ernest, where can I go to get the best burger in Seattle? Where are you gonna send me?
Oh man. So I thought about this one. And I was struggling a little bit, but then I took my wife to a place called Big Picture Issaquah.
Okay.
Big Picture Issaquah. We go there because it's one of my wife's favorite. No, it's probably her favorite. No. One of her favorite movie theaters.
Okay.
Okay.
Movie theater. Okay.
It is a movie theater. Now it is a craft movie theater, essentially. It used to be in Seattle. The pandemic came and wiped them out.
Yeah.
They lost everything. They ended up losing their lease. But they pretty much worked on it being personal. Like, so the owner, if you go there, you'll see the owner.
Wow.
And he is there, making sure service. He usually will greet you and be the person doing the ticket taking.
Wow.
He is that
That's
sort
cool.
of intimately involved. And it is, it has a little lounge area out front. You order your food at the bar. They have excellent popcorn. And it's like a little lounge area that even if you don't want to watch a movie, you could sit, have a drink, sit and have conversations. But if you go for the movie, you can order food.
Okay.
And they've one of the favorite things I order there is their smash burgers.
Okay.
And I was thinking about this and I'm like, what's the best burger I tasted? And I took her there to see a movie a couple of weeks ago for Valentine's Day. And the enjoyment I had in that burger. And I came out and talked to the owner. And he said, I have been working on that recipe for years.
Wow.
To get it right. And when I tell you, it is one of the best burgers I've ever had.
Okay.
It's not a burger joint.
Yeah.
Their burgers are on point. So if you're ever, Issaquah is just outside of Seattle, maybe a 20-minute ride outside of Seattle, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But if you're ever in the Seattle area, look up Big Picture Movies in Big Picture Movie Theater in Issaquah.
Yeah.
And it is a great experience. First of all, like I said, everything they do is pretty much top notch. It is a very private theater. It may seat 20 people. So you got to get your tickets well in advance.
Yeah.
The sound is phenomenal. It's very intimate. The service is great. They'll bring you drinks at a timed interval so you can order your drink to take in. Just bring your drink and they bring you your food. And man, I'm eating that burger in the dark, watching a movie with excellent sound, and it is a great experience, man. It is great. It's not like going to an AMC, not like going to a normal, movie theater. But there's something about the love and the care and the attention to detail.
Yeah.
It is not where I thought I would tell you to go for a burger, but I'm telling you.
I've never heard of it. Yeah, I mean, we have the AMCs out here. They got the food and they bring it to you, but it's it's never like good. It's just food because they serve food.
They throw it in the microwave or come back in there, right, and shoot it out to you.
Yeah. But no, that's cool. Big Picture Issaquah. Definitely have to hit that up. Well, Ernest, thanks for hopping on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge. To all the listeners out there, share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Ernest, any final words before we get out of here?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I would just say. I know there's a lot happening now in the workforce, and there are opportunities that you may not necessarily think of in public service. And I'm not just saying even just in public utilities, but in public service, there's a lot of opportunities. And I know federal workforce right now has been disrupted, and so there will be a lot of folks naturally looking, but even from young people. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's park on that if you don't mind. Doge, Elon Musk, Trump, they're doing the thing where they're, let's say cutting the fat or whatever. Do you think some of that workforce will spill over into the public sector, or will like you said, I feel like a lot of people who are A players in the public side can also be A players or B players, A players on the private side and make more money. So what are your thoughts on that? I'd like to hear.
Well, here's the thing. The thing about public servants is usually they are drawn to that public service, right? So could they do it? I've had many interviews where I've talked to folks who started off, or who was in public service, went to the private sector, took the lucrative opportunity, and found themselves just not happy. Yeah. Because when you are someone who is drawn to public service, like you said, there's a heart for that work. The profit really isn't the thing that you're chasing. You're not forced to make business decisions the same way when you're in the public sector. You're trying to be efficient, but you're being a steward, as opposed to someone who's trying to make a cutthroat decision to make more money.
Yeah.
Right. So that a lot of times turns people out of the private sector back into the public sector. So will you see that some folks spill over? Naturally, some folks will have to do that because there's just not enough space for everyone in any one, area. But I think what you'll see is a lot of folks in the public sector at the federal level and at the state level look for opportunities at the local level. And I even see that now. Folks, when you do it at such a higher level, you're further away from the immediate impact. When you do it in a place that's a little more local, you can see the impact more tangibly.
Yeah. Answer this for me. Does the city of Portland like, Ernest? Meaning, let's say you're calling on or you're reaching out to some of their employees. Is that like a not cool thing to do? How do you navigate those waters of like grabbing some of their talent and pulling them in Seattle?
Well, the city of Portland, if I call the city of Portland, it is usually a friendly call. Okay. Right. So I may be trying to make a connection to get information, or spread word about an opportunity, right? But usually, if I'm reaching out, I'm usually pretty targeted. I don't reach out to the municipality. I reach out to the person.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not going to call them on their work phone and ask them to take a job with another municipality. It's usually more about me gathering information, right?
Yeah.
It's about, okay, well, if you do business this way, or how is your current utility dealing with this problem? Right.
Okay.
And it's more, getting insight from a partnership standpoint. Gotcha. I don't call other municipalities trying to take their people. That's not the right way to go.
I understood. Well, thanks for answering that. Anything we left on the table? Anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I think I feel good about it. Nothing else that I feel I need to get out there. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, once again, thanks for hopping on the Public Works podcast. This has been a special one on recruiting. So thank you everybody for tuning in.